Hello Peaches! So as you can tell from the title, I'm going to be talking about 50 Shades of Grey in this video, and I was kind of a little bit unsure whether or not to make it, but then someone asked me what I thought about 50 Shades of Grey on my adult Q&A that I did the last time, like a few videos ago. So I decided to make this video anyway, and yeah, I'm just going to talk about 50 Shades of Grey and what is wrong with it, why it's not good representation of the BDSM community and the BDSM world, and why it's a really unhealthy BDSM relationship that they have in the movie. I just watched the movie just to make this video, and because I have been a little bit like back and forth whether or not to watch it, because I'm in like 4 Facebook groups that is like BDSM related, and every time someone posts something about 50 Shades of Grey, everyone agrees that it sucks and that it's bad and everything, so I was like, then I'm not going to watch it because I'm not a big fan of watching movies that suck. But I was also like, because it's such a big deal in the BDSM community, like world, and because it is about those things, maybe I should watch it also to get like what not to do in a BDSM relationship. But I was a little like, I don't know. But then I decided to make this video, and then I obviously had to watch it, so I knew what I was talking about. And when I decided to watch it, I was like, well, maybe it's a crappy movie, but at least there's a lot of sex scenes in it. But the sex scenes doesn't start until like 45 minutes in the movie. So it's just like, that's just bad, alright? That was the only good thing about that movie. And it didn't start until like, it was almost halfway done. So yeah. That was like the 2 longest hours of my life ever. But anyway, I'm going to share with you my thoughts. I wrote down in this pretty notebook because about 45 minutes in, I think it was about when, you know, the sex scene started, I already had so many things that I want to talk about in this video, and then I had to just write it down because otherwise I would forget. So I wrote down every single thing that I saw in the movie that was not good. And I just want to say that every BDSM relationship is different, but there are still some like ground rules and some things you don't do, because, you know, in BDSM is a very different kind of lifestyle, and it's very close to an abusive relationship. I'm not saying BDSM is abusive at all, but you know, if you don't follow these rules, then it will turn into abusive. Or in most cases it will. And that's why there are so many rules and there are so many boundaries and things that you have to think about. You have to talk to your partner a lot about everything to make sure that it doesn't go from being a BDSM relationship to an abusive relationship. Because it is about hurting each other physically, very often at least, or mentally, and it's about one deciding what the other person should and should not do. So, you know, that sounds abusive if you're not following the rules which comes with the BDSM lifestyle. And this movie breaks almost every single rule of that lifestyle, and that way it turns abusive. But because the lead character is a rich, really handsome guy, then it just turns romantic for some people, which I find just disgusting. Because if they used like a middle-aged guy who worked like as a plumber or something, just something normal, not very rich, then it would be a horror movie and it would be creepy and everyone would think it was disgusting and it was abusive. But because the guy, Christian Grey, is rich and handsome, it's like, oh, it's just romantic and he's so hot. And also just the way the movie is made, because it is based on Twilight fanfiction. As you can clearly see in the movie, it's made the exact same way, with like the music and the camera and just the feeling. So to someone who isn't in the BDSM community, it just seems like a romantic movie about a different kind of lifestyle. But everyone I've talked to about this who are in the BDSM community has agreed with me that this is fucking bullshit, and it's not BDSM, it's abuse. Both physically and mentally abuse. Not that much physically. It's actually mostly mental abuse, but it is also physically at some points in the movie. And the reason why it's a really bad thing is because this movie has become so popular that people get the idea that this is what BDSM is like. And that is bad for 2 reasons, because there are 2 ways this can go, and one of the ways is that people see this who are not into BDSM, vanilla people as we call them, they see this movie and they go like, oh, that's insane, he's so abusive to her, is that what BDSM is? And then they start getting these misconceptions about us and thinking that everyone in BDSM is abusive and psychopaths and all that kind of stuff. Or the other way it can go is the way that I personally seen a lot of, especially young women who saw this movie, a lot of young teenage girls, is thinking that this is what BDSM is and wanting to have it because the guy in the movie is rich and handsome and they made it romantically. So they are thinking that they want this kind of relationship even though it's actually an abusive relationship, and if they ever find a guy like that, they should get the hell out of there. So that is the things. It can lead to really bad reputation for the BDSM community, or it can lead to young girls or guys getting hurt and getting in some serious toxic relationships. And I just want to say, before going more into this, the author of this book even said that she doesn't know anything about BDSM. So that's just another proof that this is complete bullshit, because she doesn't know anything about it. She probably didn't do a lot of research on it either. So that just, you know, ties nicely together with all this. Like, that's why it's so shitty, is because she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. So enough blabbering. Now I'm just going to get into it and get into the things I've written down and explain why these things are wrong. And there are spoilers in here, just saying. If you haven't watched the movie, probably should, because if you haven't watched the movie, this video might not make that much sense. I'm trying to explain it as well as I can, so you probably can watch it without watching the movie, but I would suggest you go watch it, just so you know what I'm talking about. So the first thing in the movie that is a red flag is that almost in the beginning, Anastasia, or Anna, or whatever the fuck she's called, goes out with some friends to get drunk to celebrate something. I don't even remember what they're celebrating. But yeah, they're having fun, just drinking, chilling, get pretty drunk. And, you know, nothing wrong with that. Just getting drunk with your friends. Everyone does that, it's fun. She's in a safe place. She's with some safe people. She's having a good time. Everything like that. The problem here is that Gray, who like a couple hours before this has told Anastasia that he doesn't want anything to do with her, he comes and picks her up, and she calls him just to be like, hey, fuck you, I'm doing what I want, I'm getting drunk, so fuck you, kind of. And he gets angry at her for being drunk, even though he earlier told her that he doesn't want anything to do with her because he's not the guy for her and all that kind of stuff. But then he tells her what to do and how to live her life. And this is all before she even knows what BDSM is. And she's not in danger. Like, she's at this club with a lot of people and having a good time. She's with a lot of friends, so she's in a safe place. So he is in no position whatsoever to tell her what to do. And he comes to pick her up at this club because he's like, you're not allowed to drink, you shouldn't get drunk. But she's like, she's an adult woman. She's in a safe place. She's allowed to get drunk. If they had signed a contract saying that he is her dom and he decides whether or not she should get drunk, then he would be in like every right to go and get her and to tell her not to get drunk, because that is what a BDSM relationship is. But as I just said, at this point in the movie, she doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't even know that he's into those things. So that is the first red flag, is that he, before being her dom, before even telling her about this, thinks that he's in control over her and that he can decide what she should do when she's not in danger. So yeah, that was the first thing. The next thing is when he shows her his playroom. And she asks him a bunch of questions, of course. And one of the things she asks is, well, what will happen? What do you get out of this by hurting me? And he says that he will get pleasure from doing it, which is true. And then when she asks, well, what will I get out of it? He says, me. Like, that's the only thing you'll get. And the thing that's wrong about that is that a real dom will also give their submissive pleasure. And a real submissive will find pleasure in being dominated. And he should know this. He should have explained to her, like, if you're into this, then you will get pleasure by knowing that I get pleasure by doing these things to you. But instead he just says me, kind of as in, if you want me, this is what you need to do, even if you don't want to do it. And this is kind of tying in with the whole theme that's in the entire movie, I think, that it feels like she's only agreeing to do these things because she's in love with him. And even though she knows he's not in love with her, it feels like she kind of hopes he will be because she says yes to this. And I know she does enjoy it, and there are some scenes, sex scenes and BDSM scenes, where you clearly see she's enjoying it, but she always wants more. She always wants him to be in love with her, and she doesn't like punishment, she doesn't like to get punished, but it feels like she's only doing this because she wants him, and because she's really naive, and he knows how naive she is. So he uses that. Because if he was like a real dom, he would be able to see that in her, to see that she wanted more, and if he doesn't, then he would just end it with her, because no real dom would use someone like that, and no real nice person would use anyone like that. That's just shitty. So that just proves how shitty he is. He uses her naive kind of way of thinking and being, and he doesn't explain it to her properly. He just said, oh, you get me from it. Kind of like he knows that she won't get pleasure from this because this is not something for her, but he knows that she wants him. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but you know, it's just the wrong way, because a submissive shouldn't get the dom. Like, that's not how it should be. They should get pleasure as well. Everyone should get pleasure. Otherwise, it's not a healthy BDSM relationship. The next thing is the scene with the tie, which has become very popular, the whole tie that he wears and everything. He ties her wrist together like this, and it's pretty harmless. In the BDSM world, tying your wrist together is like nothing compared to what it can turn into. But the problem with that he's doing that to her is that they haven't had a chance to talk about what she's willing to do and what she's not willing to do. And that's a problem. And yeah, I know a lot of people in the BDSM world are just like, well, it's just tying your wrists together. But that can be a problem, because a lot of people can have anxiety problems, and a lot of people who don't have anxiety problems can get anxiety from having their wrists tied together, because that's with everything in the BDSM world. Even though this is a smaller thing in the world, it's still something that is more extreme to people who are not into those things and who haven't been introduced to it properly, which she hasn't. And everything in the BDSM world is playing with your senses, and you have to be careful. That's also why there's safe words. And the reason why it's a problem is because your wrists together, you can't move like you usually do. That's the same with ankle cuffs or blindfolds. Those smaller things are still things that needs to be discussed beforehand, because even if you don't have anxiety attacks or anything, you can still get panic attacks, and it can still be really uncomfortable to have your wrist tied together if you're not used to it and if you haven't talked about it beforehand. And they don't have a safe word at this point either. So that's the problem. Like, you need to talk about every single detail when it comes to BDSM. You don't just tie someone's wrist together, because what if they suddenly get a panic attack or anxiety attack and you don't even have a safe word? Like, it's just, no, it's not fucking good, alright? Because everything in BDSM world is a little bit scary and needs to be supervised, I guess, because everything in BDSM can lead to something uncomfortable, like panic attacks or anything like that, too much pain or anything, you know. So you need to discuss every single thing beforehand. You need to have a safe word. That's like the first thing you do when you meet someone, safe word. Alright, there we go. Now we can talk about what we want and what we don't want, and then you can do it. Don't just randomly do it. I know it's because it's supposed to be like spontaneous and romantic, but that's not how it works. The next thing is that he asked her to be his sub before discussing the contract and before discussing this. Let me remind you, she doesn't know what any of this is. She's very new to all these things. So he asked her before she knows what's going on. She did see his playroom, but she doesn't know how he will use these things. He doesn't know when he will use them. He doesn't know how much it will hurt to use them. All that kind of stuff. So before he asks her to be a sub, he should probably give her a contract so she can read through what he wants to do with her, or at least explain to her, like go into the playroom and say this is this and this, you know. Need to talk her into it a little bit more, because just asking someone who just saw a couple of whips and some handcuffs if they want to do that, it's like, no, you need to explain exactly what it is you want to do with them. And it doesn't seem like he did that, and she doesn't know anything about it, which you also will see later in the movie. Another thing is, later on he talks to her about he used to be a submissive to a woman, and he explained to her, like he's trying to convince her to be his submissive, and he tells her that like he assures her almost that she will feel free if she just submits to him. Which is bullshit. I understand if he's just said, I felt free. When I was a submissive, I felt free. He also did say that. But after saying that about himself, he said, if you submit to me, you will feel free as well. And that is not how it works. A lot of people in this world would feel not that free and feel very uncomfortable with being a submissive. So telling someone how they will feel about these kind of things when they don't even know about those kind of things is not good. It just sounds rapey, and like he's trying to convince her, like, yeah, you're going to like it, trust me, you will like it, I know it. You know, see how it sounds when I say it like that? It's like, that's not how you do. He can explain that a lot of people feel that way and that he felt that way, but saying that, you know, you will feel that way, that's not how it works, because you don't know how she will feel about it, because a lot of people don't feel like that, because a lot of people are not built to be a submissive, and that's just how it is. Another thing that really bugs me about this is when the contract finally comes after a long time, where it should have been given like a lot earlier in the movie, but they finally get this contract and he just gives it to her and tells her to read it. The problem with that is that, you know, I know later in the movie they do discuss it together, face to face, but they shouldn't have done that later. They should have done that from the beginning. Again, she's very new to all of this. There's a lot of things on there that she doesn't know exactly what means. If she doesn't know what it means, she doesn't know how he will do it to her. And he tells her to Google submissive, for example. He tells her to go home, read the contract, and then research. Like, no, because if you just Google submissive, there are 1,000 different ways to be submissive. So what if she gets her hands on the wrong kind of submissive and be like, oh, that's just like me, I want to be like that. But then when they do it, then he thinks that she should be another kind of submissive. Does that make sense? Like, they should from the beginning have sat down together and talked about what does he want and what does he not want. And then if she has some questions like, what is this, what is this, then she can ask him and he can answer. Because her getting the contract herself and having to research herself is just not good, because it's just going to lead to her being confused, maybe reading up on the wrong things. As you see in the movie, she Google search, I think it's bondage, and you see a lot of kind of scary pictures to someone who's new to this, where they're like tied up in some really uncomfortable looking ways. And she's like, she doesn't like it, she closed her laptop because she thinks it looks freaky and weird and uncomfortable. But if she had sat down with him, or he at least he could send some links to her and some pictures to her that he found that he thinks is good for her to see. But he doesn't even do that, he just tells her what to Google. But if he had sit down with her or sent her something to read, exactly links to it, then it will be so much easier, and he will be able to send her pictures that wasn't as scary as the one she was looking at, or scary for a new person at least. So that just bugs me a lot, that she's just like left on her own to do this. A real master and a real dom and mentor, which he also in this case is because he's training her, would be a lot more helpful in this case. And then another thing that kind of ties in with this is, it's just something I think it's stupid and funny, and also just to prove why it's a bad idea to just give her the contract and let her research it, is that she researched all of this, but she doesn't know what butt plugs is. She asks that, like, what's a butt plug? And she also asks what suspension is. And I'm like, well, first of all, if you got the contract and researched it, why didn't you research those two words if you didn't know what they were? But that's just a stupid thing in the movie. But another thing is that if they sat down together and talked about it, she wouldn't have been in that situation, because then she could have asked him then, and then you could have talked about it there before having to discuss what not to do and what to do. So she didn't have to make up her mind on that subject right when they were sitting there and talking about it. That way she would have time to think about, do I like butt plugs, do I want suspension, all that kind of stuff, before having to answer it in the meeting where they had to decide what to do and what not to do. But yeah, it's just a stupid mistake in the movie as well. Like, you see her researching all these things, but she doesn't even research butt plugs. Like, who doesn't do that? Who doesn't know what it is, even though they're vanilla? I know a lot of vanilla people, and all of them pretty much know what butt plugs is. Like, who doesn't know what a butt plug is? Then another thing that goes on in like pretty much all of the movie is that she really wants to sleep with him, like next to him. Not have sex with him, but actually sleep, and have him sleep next to her in the same bed. And he refuses that. And the thing that bugs me about that is that even though he's the dom, he should still be able to listen to his sub and, you know, listen to what she wants, because that's a misconception about this. Is a lot of people think that BDSM means that the dom takes all the responsibility and makes all the decisions, but that's not true. It's something the sub and the dom does beforehand. They get together and say, I want this, I want this, I want this, and then they come up with a conclusion and an idea, just in general, and then after that the dom decides what the submissive should and should not do on the subjects that the submissive have already told the dom that they're allowed to do. Does that make sense? Like, now I'm a switch, so I switch, and I'm not a lifestyle BDSM, but if I was, and if I was only a submissive, the day I get a dom, I would not want them to decide what I should eat, for example. So, you know, that's just an example. That's something you discuss beforehand. Is I would sit down with my dom and say, you can decide when we should have sex, you can decide what kind of sex we should have, you can sometimes decide what I should wear, but you should not ever decide what I'm going to eat. And then, in the future in our relationship, after we discussed all these things, he would be able to just fuck me whenever he wants, tell me what to wear, and decide what kind of sex we should have without me having to say anything. But he would still respect that I don't want him to tell me what to eat. And it's an example because that's how I would be. I would never want anyone to tell me what to eat. So that's just to kill a misconception, is that the sub has already told the dom what they're allowed to decide. And that's kind of a sidetrack. I see. How the fuck did I get to that? Alright, she wants to sleep next to him. And it's like, a lot of people don't think about that because it's like, well, he's the dom, so he's the one who's deciding. But no, because it's really a problem for her that he doesn't want to sleep next to her. So that is something that they should have discussed. That is something that they should have talked about, and she should have said, I want to rediscuss this, and I want you to reconsider doing something like this. And that's really what bothers me, is because he does know it, because she says it a lot of times, like, why don't you want to sleep next to me? And if he was a real master or dom, all that kind of stuff, he would take it into consideration. He would figure something out so they could meet halfway. So maybe he slept with her like twice a week or something. I don't know, but he just flat out deny it. That's the thing about BDSM relationships, is you need to discuss everything. Everything. If someone has a problem with something, it needs to be discussed. And they don't. She just says, I want to sleep next to you, and he's just like, no, and then he walks away. That's not a discussion. You need to talk about it. That's what really bothers me, because it does make that misconception stronger that doms decide everything, no matter what the sub says. Then the last thing is at the end of the movie, where she's all like, why do you want to hurt me? Why do you want to spank me? Why do you want to do all these things? And that's a problem, because a real sub doesn't question that, because they like to be punished and they like to be these kind of things. So they don't think it's weird that their partner likes to do these kind of things. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? A real sub likes to be punished and like the pain and all that. Well, depending on what kind of sub it is, but in this case, so they wouldn't question why their dom likes to give the pain, because both of them are kind of twisted in the eyes of normal vanilla people. It's both twisted things, and a real sub knows not to question it, because, you know, they know that their dom also doesn't understand why the sub likes pain in a way. I really hope this makes sense. I'm really trying to explain it as well as I can. But she doesn't do that. She is asking so many questions. She's like so upset. She's kink shaming Christian Grey a lot in this scene. She's like, why do you want to hurt me? What's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? Do you have some problems? Are you mentally insane? What are you doing? All that kind of stuff. No sub would ever do that. And that just again proves that she is not fit for this lifestyle, because she doesn't think like a sub should. She doesn't like all these kind of things, she's only doing it because she wants to be with him. She says that so clearly in the last scene, like, why do you want to do this to me? Can't you just hug me and let me touch you and caress you and all that kind of stuff? Which just proves that she only wants him, and he only wants to do these things to her even though he knows that she doesn't want to. I really hope that makes sense. I really tried to describe it in the best way possible, but a real sub doesn't question why the dom likes pain, because they also themselves like something in that alley and knows how the mind can work differently sometimes, which proves she's not a sub, because she does question him a lot in the last scene. So yeah, that was actually it. I know it's been a long video and a long rant. I just think it's really important to talk about this because of what I said in the beginning. It can lead to some really bad, scary, abusive relationships. And I just want to inform everyone, also kind of like, now you watch it, now you know what not to do in a BDSM relationship. Press the like button if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel as well, and thank you for watching.